Slowly getting the attendees rolling in now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this extended Q&A session. So we've got a little moderated question and answer period right now. Just a discussion. We've got Mike Gifford from Open Concept. We've got Boris and Dean Mellway from Reed. And we've got myself, of course, here to sort of maybe operate a bit as the everyman in this particular conversation. But yeah, let's see if I don't think we've got any questions yet. We've still got people slowly rolling in. Let's kick things off. Dean, you've been introducing people sporadically over the last few days. We haven't really heard from you very much. I'd love to hear what you think. You know, how you think the energy's been over the last few days. If you want to sort of just give us a finger on the pulse of the attendee of this type of thing and weigh in on that.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, John. I must say that my wildest expectations have been exceeded by this virtual approach to Enable Ottawa. This is our 5th year, and it's always been a well-attended conference, but I've heard numbers as high as 500 or 600 individual people have joined in, maybe even higher than that. I'll have to chase Moira down later and get the final number from her, but it's been extraordinary, and there's been great participation. There's lots of great questions. It was too bad that we couldn't get all those questions on the air in Max's session just now, and maybe you can capture some of them, or maybe some of the people are back and they'll ask them again while we have the group of us here. So it's been a wonderful event, and Enable Ottawa has always had an exhibition as part of it as well, and that's something that we couldn't do. I'm sure there are platforms that will allow us to do that if this keeps going for too long. But we still have in mind that once we're able to gather, that the second half of Enable Ottawa 2020 will happen if we're able to, and it'll be an exhibition of technology and assistive devices, and it'll be an in-person event. It may be pushed to 2021, but as soon as it's possible, we're going to make it happen.
Great. And yeah, it seems to be that what's interesting about a platform like this is that, you know, when you're first planning an event like this, you sort of feel like, oh, what are we going to miss? Like, what are we not going to get that we're getting in a live conference? But then as you start running things, you realize how many things you're getting from this platform that you don't get at a live conference, which is sort of, you're starting to see all the pros that you get from a virtual conference over a, you know, one that happens face to face, which is always kind of like a really nice surprise, I think. How about you, Boris? What do you think in terms of, you've again been sort of more or less attending as an attendee rather than as a presenter?
Well, I'm just stunned by how many people we had and the interest. I know that we've been worrying a lot. We've been wondering what can go wrong. We've heard all kinds of pessimistic experiences about virtual events and trying to anticipate the future somehow. So I'm just amazed how well this went. To your point, John, I think there are clear advantages in all of this in having done a virtual conference. An obvious one is getting to these to the speakers, getting the speakers as well to participate. I mean, not that the online environment is not without barriers. But being able to log in quickly and out and you know, listen in and have some food and do other chores. There's that as well, something you can't do in a live conference. And I'm saving my reaction for a little bit later on for the closing, John. So you're kind of I know you're attempting to mess up my plan, but I have a few more words to say at the end. So just to leave it at that.
No, fair enough. I think that, like I said, I was sort of hoping that there would be some more questions flooding into the Q&A from our attendees, but it's still a bit of a ghost town right now. So, sometimes you've got to go with the flow and pad things out. Mike, what do you think when you're thinking about, obviously you've seen some of the presentations from the previous panelists. Have you learned anything new maybe from listening that you didn't expect, or maybe just make some comments on how you prefer the virtual platform over a physical one?
I mean, there's always little things to learn from different people, and it was great to hear Max's views of where he sees things are going after COVID and how to go off and best prepare for that. It's a real challenge. Like none of us have that crystal ball to look into to see how to go off and prepare and how to address that. But certainly, calling for people to get out and get active and be able to ask our members of parliament to go off and to remind them that this is something that is really important, and to have. I was really struck with Yasmin Laroche with her final comment of her presentation, talking about the importance of having solidarity with other groups that are working working on issues of oppression and minority groups that are not being particularly well supported by our society. As far as our the opportunities for virtual conferences, I mean, here we are, an event where we can have it available for people in English and in French, as well as for people who are, who have a whole range of disabilities. Like, when was the last event you went to that had real-time transcription in 2 different languages in it? I mean, I don't know that it almost never happens even in government events unless it's specifically an accessibility event. And that this team pulled it off, it's in relatively short notice is wonderful. I'd like to see more things like this happen when we're going back and can safely have physical events as well, because this is something that technology allows us to do, and that we haven't gotten used to doing, because we're so used to doing events the old way. And I think that we can say this is our opportunity to go off and to think about doing things differently.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you make, especially about the fact that it makes it more accessible by the fact that it allows so many more people to attend and so many more people to be able to consume the content without having to worry as much about the way that it's being delivered. When you have a live event, trying to handle the closed captioning and things like that can be a little bit more of a struggle. We've got a question here from Kim Kilpatrick. She's asking, how do we harness some of the positive changes coming out of COVID to make things better for us with disabilities? Who wants to take that one? Don't all clamor at once. Let's put this over to Dean. I think Dean's a good person for this one.
I'm happy to attempt, but I'd like to hear from Mike and Boris as well. And Kim, it's nice to have you with us at this event. If I put a list of the people that I turn to when I want to make sure we're doing things right, Kim is one of them. So I think the big thing is that we have to not. I think Max said it, others have said it. We have to not let up. We have to now take advantage of the things we're learning through this process. I mean, I'm going to be excited when we do Enable Ottawa next year as a live event, and yet we still have this component to it. So these are the kinds of things I think that we have to keep the momentum going. Max makes some good points when he says the government's supposed to be working for us. So don't be shy about suggesting to government things that we can do and things that they can do to make it easier for this momentum to continue.
Great, thanks very much.
So
go ahead, Boris.
Just on that, I think there's a big lesson learned from the COVID. I think that this has been talked about, but I just want to make sure it's said again at this point in time. I think this situation has proved how much more flexible everything can be. All those systems and structures and processes that have been presented to everybody, and especially in particular persons with disabilities, as being rigid and impossible to change. Often those policies are the response to requests for better working conditions and more flexibility. It's amazing to me how this pandemic has all of a sudden revealed that there is no such thing as ultimately rigid structures, and that we can create much more flexible processes for workplaces, for all kinds of other engagements. And I think that's going to be probably at least to me, that's one of the greatest lessons learned from this pandemic. And my only concern is that we don't, or the society doesn't forget this as soon as if we ever return to normal. So in some ways, it's almost like wishing that things in that aspect of our society never go back to normal, as in that we continue being open to flexible working from home, different kinds of access, thinking about the various ways of accessing information and so on. I think I'm just hoping that will continue.
We have another question here from Andrea. She's asking, how do each of you connect to people with lived experience in order to inform you how to provide services? Especially during COVID-19, it may be particularly difficult. I'm hoping to work on a new accessibility plan, and I want to engage people to better meet the needs.
I can just start by saying that there are still so many ways to go and connect with people with disabilities through the internet. And there's a number of channels through Twitter or Slack, where people who have lived experience are active participants of that. And it is a really excellent way to do that. It's not quite the same as having an in-person opportunity to meet with and engage with somebody, or for that matter, to find a way to employ them and to bring them into the organization and work alongside them. But it's still something that it can certainly be done in this pandemic.
Does anyone else want to take a stab at that question, or should we move on to another one?
Well, Mike's comments even earlier in his talk about building community. There's a lot of opportunity to connect with people, and I would turn to things like the newsletter that Mike puts out that talks about all the things going on. Organizations like or apps like Meetup, where you can go in and type in the name accessibility, and you get all kinds of events going on that are virtual at this point in time. So it's the opportunity is there. You have to choose maybe that over Netflix a little more, and you'll be able to get connected.
There is a question that builds on that from I think Lori Prue asked this early on in the chat box. Considering what you've learned over the last few days, what are going to be your next steps or inspiration for action? I think this is a great question. I can tackle it first, and then let everybody else respond. Lori, I think I don't think we waited for Enable Ottawa. I think this is one of the manifestations of our efforts to connect people locally, provincially, nationally as well on these issues. I think Enable Ottawa showcased the power of bringing people together from different sectors, different backgrounds, different experiences,
Yeah, no. I think that's good. I think it's sort of learning. I think the great thing about something of this sort is that we're all learning different lessons and then sharing those takeaways with each other in real time. That's the great thing that we're sort of getting from the platform that we wouldn't necessarily get elsewhere. You know, like I remember when I went to last year's Enable event, and I was waiting to speak to Ricardo from Microsoft. And there was a line of people all standing around a table waiting to speak with him because, you know, of the way that it works physically, is that you sort of wait your turn and then you have that conversation. Whereas this allows one person to ask a question and then it gets answered for everyone, which is, I think, is a really wonderful thing. I've got a question here from Shara. She's asking here, and I think it's good because it goes to everyone, and it's saying, as allies to people with disabilities, what actions will each of you be taking in the new world after COVID to find new opportunities to hire people with disabilities? And I'll start that off. I run my own small little business, helping nonprofits with communications and other sort of endeavors. And one of the things that I've already started to do is build a virtual team of people with various different accessibility concerns and needs, so that if I'm building out a platform for a client, even if they're not asking for those accessibility pieces, I want to build those in from the ground up. I don't want to be waiting until I hear someone asking, oh, I need to be able to have closed captioning, or, oh, I need to have ASL. No, I want to have those things provided to everyone as universal access, because I find that even like the closed captioning, I don't necessarily need the closed captioning myself, but I find it really useful to use them anyway, because now I've got a text record of the entire conversation and of all the presentations that I can look through, I can search, I can use for reference in the future without having to scramble to take notes. What do you think, Boris?
So we're with the READ initiative at Carleton University. Its sole focus is accessibility. So we've been putting a lot of emphasis. I think it kind of goes without saying, in engaging and hiring persons with disabilities. We are in an educational institution, so a lot of our focus is on hiring students with disabilities as well. So that's one of the key priorities for us. So that will continue. That was always there and will never change. But I think for me, the if you will, a new insight is this aspect I spoke earlier about, where we can see that it is possible to have people work from home. It is possible to get work done and maintain those performance metrics, working from home, working flexible hours, allowing people to be able to juggle a life with work in a way where we are actually supporting that balancing, as opposed to making it difficult. So that's for me something that I take away as far as hiring and employment of persons with disabilities going forward.
So, I mean, on our team, I think that our approach is more about trying to go off and fix the systems. So we worked for over a decade improving the Drupal content management system to see that is accessible by default. And in the last couple of years, been looking more at how to go off and fix other systems. And so right now, one of the issues that we're quite passionate about is procurement, because we want to see that there's some advantage to actually having to vendors who can actually deliver accessible products. And right now there isn't much. There's a standard line that government and other organizations put on their website or their contracting processes to say, this site must be WCAG 2.0 AA compliant. But then it's never looked at again. They're never evaluated to see how well did that vendor achieve that. And we want to go off and change the system and getting governments and others to go off and ask the question of, do you hire people with disabilities? Making sure that gets worked into the process so that there's a real advantage for people who can deliver accessible services, for people who have who can draw on teams with lived experiences and are not simply a matter of looking at who produces the shiniest proposal and who has the lowest price. Because if it's a lowest price issue, then accessibility will lose out, because accessibility costs money. It takes time to do it right, and you need skills and experience and training to keep up with it. And so we have to stop thinking that this is something you get for free, and making sure that you bring in people and train people with disabilities and using the technology is an important part of that. But again, that's something that costs money and that clients need to pay for, because it is an extra.
That was a comment that came out of one of the sessions yesterday. Accessible by design, or I should say inclusive by design, means accessible by default. So the idea that if we work to make more things accessible from the beginning, then we're going to find that by default they're going to be, if they're designed right, they'll be accessible.
Great, thanks, Dean. There's a comment here from Kathy. She's saying, I saw a question from Andrea Nicholson, who's referring to a new accessibility plan. It would be so cool to consider creating a community of practice where we can share our plans and identify practices. I think that's a really awesome comment, and I wanted to sort of get that verbally into the chat record here so that we could get it in front of everyone. We've also got a question from Melanie Colin. She's saying, as someone who'd like to raise the bar on virtual conferences in academia, especially RE accessibility, I've been on a bit of a recon mission. Can you think of a good format in which to share the things that worked for you / didn't work for you in terms of your website setup, transcription surface, email correspondence, etc., so that others like me can learn from you? Melanie, I would love to help you with that. I would love to take that offline and give you some feedback on that as well. I would definitely say that the platform that we've been using to run this event, it's called Hey Summit. It's really helped us to sort of create an umbrella over a lot of the processes that you would have to handle otherwise, but it wasn't without its own hiccups, because it's a fairly new platform and it's seen such a huge spike in popularity when we had questions for their own support, when we were trying to overcome some of the hurdles. At the beginning of the event, we were sometimes waiting almost up to a week before we would get responses back. So and that's just something to expect in this sort of environment. So we had to kind of bob and weave with the struggles, and it's been a learning experience. But I'll be happy to share my email address with you in a message, and if you want to ask me some more questions, I'd be happy to help you. We've also got another question actually from Kathy again. She's saying, how do you manage the ethics of engaging with lived experience, especially in an online capacity? Do you want to start that off, Boris?
Yeah, you see, Kathy has a lot. Kathy would answer this better than me. That's the point, and I would love to hear Kathy speak to this a little bit more, to hear her thoughts, because I know there's a lot behind that question as well. I think I can reflect on this from one angle. As Kathy knows, and some of the other people, my particular passion is non-visible disabilities. non-visible disabilities is an interesting space because of that. Sometimes there's a pressure to disclose when people would rather not, and then there's the side to this where people would rather not have to disclose and would focus on creating environments that are as accessible as possible, so that doesn't need to be an issue that they have to deal with. I think in virtual environments, on that latter point, I think the virtual environments can be a little bit more accommodating, for the lack of a better word, in terms of such a pressure on self-disclosure, by allowing more flexibility in engaging and participating. So that would be one positive way at looking at that question.
That's great. Thanks very much. We're
just
getting, yeah, go ahead, Mike. We've got a couple more minutes left. We're going to be moving across to our closing remarks in about 3 minutes. So we'll hear from Mike and perhaps Dean, and then close the session.
I just want to say that that the focus on video shifts things, and audio quality is so important in order to have a good experience, and that if people with speech impediments are going to have more difficulty through this type of environment. I've done some experimentation with virtual reality and accessibility and looking at that, and there's some really wonderful work that's being done there as well, and it can actually benefit some groups of users with disabilities. But again, trying to be, I think a lot of it's coming down to being conscious and aware of who is in the community and how are people engaging with these virtual spaces, and how to make sure that you're able to support those people who are not necessarily able to go off and participate as fully as others.
Great. Well, thanks very much. And thanks to everyone for participating. We got through pretty much all the questions, which is great. And we've seen that the chat is just full of people, not necessarily asking questions, but actually talking to one another and networking and building a whole bunch of new momentum, which is really, really inspiring to see. So we're going to close this Q&A. We're going to move right over without a break directly into the closing remarks. So tune in and we will be back very shortly. Thanks to everyone again for attending and everyone for a great summit. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much. Closing remarks in 30 seconds.